I'm going to cut out just a standard girl size 8 suit, style number 1, so it has the seam at the waist. This is just a piece of leftover fabric that I save for ready-mades. So I'm just going to show you how I do this. The first thing you want to do is find the grain line. Almost all of the Lycra fabrics, if you run your hand down them, one way is smooth, one way is rough. So I always figure you want the smooth going down the suit from top to bottom. So, and you always want to cut all the pieces of the suit in the same direction on the fabric, just like you do any other, anything else that you sew. So I have my size 8 pattern here, and I just lay out and cut one piece at a time. I find that that helps me conserve fabric. So I'm just going to line this up. You always want to watch where your little edges are there. I can't tell you how many times I've had to recut a piece of fabric because, doggone it, I wasn't paying attention. So I'm just going to cut out this. The ready-mades I just do according to just the standard pattern size. I am just sending you all the patterns, my patterns, just the way they are. And if you want to cut your own, of course, that's perfectly fine. But some of these I cut years and years ago. So there's the first skirt. We're going to do another one. And when you have oddball shapes of fabric like this, you won't be able to see it on the camera, but when you're looking at the fabric, you can actually see the grain lines in there. So that'll help you just kind of line everything up and make sure you've got it on the straight grain. Get this laying flat here. When you're cutting these out, make sure you're watching. There's in most of the sizes of patterns, I have a skirt pattern, one for style 1 suits and one for style 2 suits. And the style 2 suit has the Empire bust. So the skirt is about 2 to 3 inches longer, depending on the size. Just make sure you pick the right one. You'll know because it's longer, and also the top edge is not on an angle. It's straight, so you can kind of tell the difference. And it should say on the pattern, style number 2. Try to make it easy for you. Scissors have a dead spot in them. That's going to drive me crazy. I'm doing this at a very awkward angle. Skirt. It doesn't matter at all what order you cut the pieces out. It just can be totally random, just kind of depending on the shape of the piece. And so this is the bodice front. I can fit that on here. Check the direction of my grain again. I just line it up. Again, just try to keep it use as little fabric as possible. Since this is a scrap I won't be cutting any more suits out of this. I'm only going to be able to get one. So if I had to make any adjustments to this suit, if the buyer had sent me specific measurements, I would have to adjust this, obviously. One thing, when a lot of little girls are really skinny for their height, for the average measurements, and when you're adjusting like the bust measurement across here, some of them, I mean, they'll be like a lot smaller. And you want to be careful not to just chop it all off this edge, because then your sleeve is not going to fit in here. You can probably come in 1/4 of an inch. I mean, because everything's so stretchy, you can still stretch it to make the sleeve fit a bit, but I wouldn't come in more than maybe 3/8 of an inch or so. Sometimes you can just pull the whole piece in a little bit like this. You can measure the shoulder measurement, and sometimes you can kind of cut this a little bit smaller. Across the shoulders, generally speaking, you can, since the fabric is stretchy, it does not have to be the exact measurement from here, you know, across their shoulders. It can stretch. So you can cut the shoulders so they're going to have to stretch 1 to 2 inches, and it will be just fine. Especially, and of course, on bigger suits, the bigger the suit is across, the more stretch you can have. So like on a lady's large suit or even a medium, you can cut across the shoulders. You can cut it 2 to 3 inches, so it's going to finish 2 to 3 inches smaller, and just when you put the suit on, it's going to stretch out easily far enough. For a girl's suit, I would say 1 to 2 inches at the max. So this is a way that you can kind of still get that full sleeve in, and still cut it a little bit smaller. You can just pull it off of here and just kind of, you'll just have to mess with your measurements. So there's the back. Get some of the extra fabric here. Now we'll cut the front. Now on lady suits, you will notice that the bodice front is about, depending on the size, about maybe 1/2 inch longer than the bodice back is. And that is just to give a little bit of ease through the bust, just to give a little bit more room in there. Not on the girls' ones, but you'll notice that on the ladies. And so when you sew the ladies' suits up this seam, you'll just have to stretch. You just stretch the front a little bit, and it works great. One thing, the difference between the bodice front and the bodice back too, I'm going to show you. On a lady's, now this is a little girl, so this isn't going to apply, but on a lady's suit, if the measurement that you're going to be cutting, say it's 9 inches, when you look on your chart and you see that you want the bust to finish at 35 inches, so you're going to cut it 9 inches. On the lady sizes, often what I'll do is I will cut the back 1/4 inch smaller and the front 1/4 inch larger, again to give a little bit more ease, because the front measurement on a woman is going to be bigger around than the back. So I will cut this, if my measurement is supposed to be 9 inches, I will cut this one 8.75 on the back, and I'll cut this 9 1/4 on the front. You're still ending up with a finish at 35 inches, but you've given a little bit more room in the front. So that's just kind of a little trick. It's all about getting a good fit. You want it to just slip on and just feel super comfortable. So these scissors are really annoying. So there's the back. Now the only other thing I need to cut now are the sleeves. And generally speaking, again, you want the you want it to follow the grain line. My sleeve pattern fell in the box over here. With the sleeves, you can sometimes kind of cheat on this because no, that's not the right one. There it is. Sometimes you can, depending on the fabric, you can get away with cutting the sleeve on the lengthwise grain. Doing it this way rather than following it the way you do with the bigger pieces of the suit, because they are smaller pieces, and sometimes if you're getting kind of close, or if you just happen to have that perfectly shaped piece of fabric where it will work. Here I have the selvage. I could squeeze that sleeve out of here, and once you sew it on, you'll never notice that it's a different direction, that it's cut a different direction. That is not always true. Some fabrics, if they're turned a different direction, you can really see it'll have a different sheen to it. The light will hit it differently and it will look really differently. Those are generally true with darker fabrics like navies and blacks and things like that. So you can just kind of play with those again and see what you think. But this fabric here would be a perfect candidate for just cutting it out. And since I am just cutting it right out of the middle here, because I'm going to toss this entire piece of fabric after I cut this suit. So normally I would not be this wasteful with the fabric. So you're going to just cut it out now on the pieces of the suit, on the pattern pieces. You will see that I have notches, little clips here, and I've kind of highlighted some of them with pink. But these are just like notches on any pattern that are going to help you line up things. On the sleeves, there's one at the very top, which will help you line it up with the shoulder seam on the bodice. There's also a mark here on girl sizes and little girl sizes only that denotes the back. You'll want to line, the sleeves are shaped differently from front to back, and if you sew it on backwards, it's going to not fit quite right. So you do want to pay attention to the back. And then there's one more notch, and that is right in the center of the bottom of the sleeve, and this is just to help you line the Meant to Be Modest label that you'll be sewing on one of the sleeves. And you will be making all kinds of alterations to the suits. People will be ordering different lengths of sleeves and skirts, all different kinds of things that you'll just need to just pay attention to. And so here with these, whoops, I didn't cut that very well. I just make maybe a little 1/8 inch of a snip, and you'll be able to see that really easily once you go to line those things up. One of the things, like with sleeves, the things that you need to think about when you're making them longer is how big around the arm is. On one of my papers here, I have an arm circumference. Now these are just like the bicep, kind of around the arm in the middle of the bicep, I would guess. But at least kind of gives you an idea. A lot of ladies like 3/4 sleeves. And you can kind of measure on yourself what it is. And if they're a bigger lady, just add maybe an inch or something. Of course, you can always email them and ask them to measure around their arm where the hem is going to be. And especially if they want it to fit a particular way. I usually want to cut it so it at least finishes at the circumference of their arm, or right about there. You don't want it big and floppy. And that goes for the bottom of the leggings hem as well. Generally speaking, you can just kind of guess an average that the opening of the bottom of the leggings it finishes at about 12 inches. If they're a bigger lady, you'll want to add some onto that. And again, you can always email them and just ask them for that measurement. They're always happy to give you that because they want it to fit nicely too. So there's our sleeve. So generally speaking, if you're going to make your sleeve longer, I lay the sleeve pattern out on the wrong side of the fabric, and I'll measure from here to how long they want the sleeve to be finished, and then you'll add a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch for this seam and 1/4 inch for the hem. So you'll measure that, and I usually I take like something nice and straight, and I line it up with the snips that are right in the middle up here and right in the middle here, and then however long, I'll put a dot there, and then however long or however big around their arm is, you want to figure that out, and then you'll just measure across, and you'll want to make sure that your measurement from the bottom of the sleeve to here is the same on both sides, because otherwise they're going to get all wonky. You don't want this one longer and this one shorter, because when you try to sew them together, obviously that's not going to work. So you'll work all that stuff out. You'll learn how that goes. But there's our sleeve. We've got all of our pieces cut out now, and we're going to cut out our birthday suit for this. And again, I just try to find a piece. I don't think that's going to be wide enough. And I don't use the pattern piece for this necessarily, especially if it's a custom suit. You want it to be exactly the same. So I just usually put the pattern away at this point and just use the actual bodice pieces that I've cut. You just need a piece for the front and one for the back. And again, I always just try to line everything up. This one I'm actually going to be able to put it all the way up over here because I've got a bigger piece there. So that's going to work out. Makes my Dutch heart happy when I can just use up those smaller pieces of fabric. The birthday suit has a very definite grain to it as well that you'll definitely want to make that go the right way. So there's the back. Now at the back you want to make a clip on the birthday suit right at the center back, because that's where your size tag is going to be lined up. So there's that, and then we will cut out the front. be able to do this in your sleep after you've done several suits. It just becomes second nature to just kind of line things up the same way. And again, I think I say this in another one of the videos, I purpose to kind of always do things kind of the same way, because it really does help me to make fewer mistakes. If you're just kind of in your muscle memory or in your brain, you're used to doing it exactly the same way every time, then you can just, usually when I'm cutting and so I'm listening to a book on tape or a sermon or something, and you don't have to worry too much about making a mistake. So there it is. You've got all your pieces. You've got your front and back with the lining. You've got your sleeves, and you've got your two skirts. Now, since this is a ready-made, we will not be making a pair of leggings to go with it, because the customer will want to choose their color. So this one, they'll have a lot of options. There's fuchsia, orange, royal blue. All those would look good. So that is how you cut out a style number 1 suit.